Hello, everyone. Can we all unmute now as well? Welcome to Our Souls Our Own. I'm going to hand this over to Linda. Hello, everyone. Can we all unmute now as well? Welcome to Our Souls Our Own. I'm going to hand this over to Linda. Hello, everyone. Can we all unmute now as well? Welcome to Our Souls Our Own. I'm going to hand this over to Linda. Hello, everyone. Can we all? So something's happening on a loop. I'm sorry, we're having a little bit of technical difficulty. So if you're clicked into the extra, can you turn that off? Because we're getting an endless legal feedback. I'm sorry, we're having a little bit of technical difficulty. So if you're clicked into the extra, can you turn that off? Because we're getting an endless legal feedback. I'm sorry, we're having a little bit of technical.
Great. Better?
Yeah, is it working now? Yay. Linda, I'm going to let you start everything off.
Thank you, Stephanie. Welcome to our presentation of Our Souls Our Own with this wonderful group of artists from around the globe. My name is Linda Bissesti, and I'm the Artistic Director of the Southern California Shakespeare Festival and Southern California Shakespeare Festival Guild. And it is my honor to join this wonderful group of artists. I do want to take the acknowledgement right now that one of our wonderful actors, Marissa Pitts, because of the challenges, as I know you all can appreciate, of going online during these challenging times, is going to be off the StreamYard and YouTube video live feed because we can only accommodate a certain number of people at the same time. So Marissa, a big thank you from all of us to you, Marissa Pitts, who does wonderful work, as you will see. And just a little bit about the Shakespeare Festival. It was started 17 years ago at Cal Poly Pomona, where I'm a professor and head of acting, for my love of Shakespeare and also for training actors. And it is happy to still be around, redefining ourselves during these challenging times, rising to the occasions. We hope in many ways of continuing to provide opportunities for artists and to meet the challenges of this particularly turbulent time. I think that's all I want to say, except for thank you again. Thank you all for tuning in. And then I'll pass it over to Stephanie Courtney, our wonderful director, a friend of mine, and is in the beautiful country of Ireland. And I will let her make her introductions. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you very much. And thank you to this wonderful group of actors. Thank you to Marissa Pitts. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Courtney, and I am technically the director of this event, but I like to see myself more as a curator of these pieces more than a director of them. These amazingly talented women sort of showed up and did their own directing and handed their pieces off to me, and we just sort of spliced them together. I'm a theater director and producer. I was the artistic director of Fortune's Fool Productions here in Ireland that produced Free Shakespeare in the Park for many years. I taught at the Gaiety School of Acting for 7 years, and I am still a guest instructor at the Pacific Conservatory of the Performing Arts in California, where I teach Viewpoints and Suzuki. And I directed As You Like It for the Southern California Shakespeare Festival Guild in 2016. So I'd like to take a moment and introduce some of our actors. First, I would like to introduce Andress Nichols. She is the artistic director of The Coop, a theater and film production company in New York. She was the recipient of Broadway World's Best Supporting Actress in a Play for her role as Beatrice in Ivan Van Hove's production of Arthur Miller's A View from the Bridge, which performed at the Goodman in Chicago, the Amundsen in Los Angeles, and at the Kennedy Center. She's been nominated for a Lucille Lortel Award, a Helen Hayes Award, and an Elliot Norton Award for her portrayal of St. Joan in George Bernard Shaw's St. Joan. And Bedlam Ensemble won an Elliot Norton Award and an urn for their 4-person production of St. Joan, which was absolutely sublime. Next, I would like to introduce Dawn Stern. Dawn is a New York City-based actor and also member of the Coop. She is the COO of Decrute, which treats trauma using Shakespeare and science to unwire military veterans from war. It's an amazing group of people and it's amazing work. She was a series regular on Viper, 413 Hope Street, Star Hunter, and Nobody. She had a reoccurring role on The Young and the Restless and more than 25 guest starring appearances, including Star Trek Enterprise, Ally McBeal, Profiler, Beverly Hills 90210, and True Blood. She fell in love with Shakespeare at the age of 12 and has played Kate, Lady Macbeth, Olivia, Paulina, Goneril, Elizabeth, and Margaret. Next, I would like to introduce Aoibhinn McCann. Aoibhinn is an Irish actress based in Dublin between Belfast and London. She recently won the Irish Times Theatre Award for Best Actress in 2020 for her role of Blanche Dubois in A Streetcar Named Desire at the Lyric Theatre in Belfast. For our American friends, an Irish Times Theatre Award is the equivalent of a Tony, and she won that award just after lockdown happened, so she hasn't had a chance to truly celebrate it, so I'm going to celebrate it here. Her screen credits include, I'm going to mess up this name, Scotty in Vikings Season 6, Awakenings, Can't Cope, Won't Cope, and Soulsmith. She is also the voice of Master Chef in Ireland. Next, one of my favorite mentors and a very good friend, Linda Bessesti. She is the artistic director of the Southern California Shakespeare Festival Guild and a designated Linklater teacher trained by Kristen Linklater herself. She is the head of acting at Cal Poly Pomona. You've seen her in, I never know whether to say Ratchet or Ratched on Netflix, How to Get Away with Murder, Criminal Minds, Monk, Teachers, and The West Wing, among many others. And I'm going to hand over the rest of the introductions to her.
Hi, I'm going to unmute. So thank you so much. And as you can see, we are in very good company with this wonderful group of artists. I'd like to start by recognizing the wonderful and dear friend of mine, Kimberly Arn. Kimberly has experience as a performing artist. She is a wonderful, very significant arts educator and a very talented ceramic artist. Her professional acting background consists of Broadway and off-Broadway, regional theater, film, and television, nominations for a Tony Award and a Drama Desk Award for August Wilson's Joe's Turner, Come and Gone, and a nomination for LA Stage Alliance Ovation Award for the Merchant of Venice, Los Angeles Women's Shakespeare Company. Her other credits include A Noise Within, Ariel, The Tempest, and many years with the Los Angeles Women's Shakespeare Company at the helm, led by the very inspirational Lisa Volpe, who is a dear friend of ours. And I had the opportunity to meet Kimberly and work with her on stage many times through that. She's also a business owner and a lead creative consultant at Open Top Creativity. She received her MFA degree from the Yale School of Drama and her BFA degree in Dramatic Arts from Emerson College. Thank you, Kimberly. Our next artist is Kathleen Dunn. Kathleen will be playing Regan this summer in King Lear. And Kathleen is a Los Angeles-based artist and co-founder of the award-winning Open Fist Theater. She's received 4 Drama Log Award nominations for her leading roles on the Los Angeles stage. She combines her love of theater with her expertise in voice and accents. She is one of the best. She has numerous credits, not only as a very fine actress, but as a wonderful, very fine coach, an accent coach for TV and film. Some of her many credits are Marvel's Avengers, Warner's Pacific Rim, Red Dawn, and an on-set coach for Mad Men. We're very happy to have her be part of this, as I am with all these artists. Our next actress is Marissa Pitts, who's not in the room, who has very graciously stepped out because StreamYard is going to work on getting as many people as possible in the room after this. Marissa is a former student of mine and a colleague. She has an MFA in television, film, and theater, and an MA in theater arts from Cal State University, LA. She's an alumni of Cal Poly Pomona, trained with Shakespeare and Company. Miss Pitts is an adjunct teacher at Cal State, LA, and a guest lecturer at Cal Poly Pomona. Proud member of SAG-AFTRA and Equity. She's also a radio host in a wonderful show, Chris Collins Show. And she has played many parts for us. She worked with Stephanie in As You Like It, and we're happy to have her. Thank you so much. Melissa Labina, Melissa, who has actually stepped in with Mr. Richard Klein, who's been a tremendous help to help us with StreamYard today, is not only an actor, but she's also helping us with this broadcast. She's a recent graduate of Cal Poly Pomona. She's been studying theater since 2015. I had the opportunity to direct her in Boy Gets Girl, where she did a wonderful job as the lead character. She's also an exquisite actor as well as an unbelievable stage manager. She's currently working on 12th Night with us, playing Mariah. Melissa would like to thank Stephanie, Linda, and Tom Bryant. A shout out to Tom Bryant for his work with her in theater. And we're honored to have her. Caitlin Tice. Caitlin is thrilled to join the Southern California Shakespeare Festival in this production. She is a graduate of the Orange County School of the Arts. She's a terrifically talented musical theater performer as well as an actor. She's a recent graduate of Cal Poly Pomona, but more recently, she is a graduate of the Master of Arts in Shakespeare from the University of Birmingham in the United Kingdom. She spent a year in Stratford-upon-Avon, studying with the Royal Shakespeare Company. Some of her many credits are Constance, Goodnight Desdemona, Romeo and Juliet, Petruchio, Mrs. Bennet, Pride and Prejudice, which I had the opportunity to direct her in, and we're happy to have Caitlin be part of this. Linnea Barkland. Linnea is saved my life when I directed The Two Noble Kinsmen, that crazy play at the American Shakespeare Center in the Mary Baldwin University program. She is a recent graduate. She has an Master's of Letters and a Master's of Fine Arts in Shakespeare and Performance from Mary Baldwin University. She lives with 3 cats in northwestern United States. She is a wonderful dramaturg and a very fine actress. And I hope I haven't forgotten anybody. Have I, Stephanie? Help me with this.
No, I think we've got everybody.
All right. And I just want to give a shout out to everybody to thank them for their time and their talent and their commitment. And this is part of our Year with Lear to keep the pulse of the Shakespeare Festival alive. Online, directed by Dr. Baron Kelly. Thank you so much. Stephanie.
Excellent. So thank you. I really want to, I have this thing about celebrating women's accomplishments because we don't often get to celebrate our accomplishments and who we are in the world as much as we should. And I'm really, I'm a big believer in that. The way that we did this was most everyone chose their own monologues and everybody did self-taping or had somebody, a friend or a partner, tape them. And for those of you who are watching who are not in the business, self-taping is something that we do for auditions. We, as casting directors, we watch self-tapes. As actors, actors go ahead and self-tape for auditions and send them in. And I'm curious from the actor's point of view, just in case anybody has any 2 cents about this, about how this was like self-taping, how this was different than self-taping, if you have any insights into the process of it or anything that you learned or wanted to say about this process of putting up the videos before we actually watch the videos. And you're all muted, so y'all need to, if you want to speak, go ahead and unmute yourselves and speak up.
I just want to say that mine probably wasn't a self-tape audition. I was sort of put myself as a renegade artist with my camera or with my phone. So you'll see a different environment and a different exploration of movement and text. So I just want to make sure that this, I didn't put it in the world of an audition tape. So
no, I'm just saying that that's what we normally do. And so that was sort of the premise of people normally know how to self-tape, not that this is a self-tape or that this was an audition by any stretch of the imagination, because I gave you all a ton of creativity and said, go run with it. And like with Dawn made a work of art and just sent me a work of art and it's gorgeous. So these weren't meant to be auditions. I was just making the connection between those 2 things.
I'd just like to say, and I apologize, I forgot to introduce Richard Klein, who is our technical supervisor. And it's going to be a segue into my piece because Richard actually filmed my piece. in the backyard here. And without his expertise, Richard Klein is a graduate of the Cal Arts MFA. He's an actor as well as a producer. He has a wonderful company called Frame 87, and extremely talented producer, director, and actor. And what was interesting is I found it quite terrifying, actually, to do Shakespeare this way. I don't know if anybody else felt that, but I don't know. I mean, it was certainly better material than most of the things I auditioned for. So I was really happy about that, because, you know, there is a belief you don't have to work so hard when the material is good. But I found it somewhat terrifying. And I don't know if anybody else felt that way, but that's all I have to offer.
Can you hear me? Just want to double check. Yeah, I guess I tried to, you know, falling asleep at night prior to recording all of this. I thought, oh, I could do something really interesting. And then I realized that I would probably, in my environment that I'm in right now, in lockdown, with the limitations that are in place, I thought, okay, I just have to try and just get the words right and not screw around too much. But I guess there's something interesting about having to perform Shakespeare in an almost self-tape environment. It made me think about it differently, which is an adventure, to be positive. But that's about it.
Yeah, I don't know about a work of art. It wouldn't leave me. I had an opportunity to do Margaret last fall, a little bit of Margaret last fall. And when I was doing it, this came to mind. What you're about to see came to my mind, and I had to put it away because it's completely decontextualized from Margaret in the play. And that's what I worried about when I was taping this. I was like, is this even relevant? But it seemed relevant to the conversation, the way that I heard it. And so that's what I did. I just kind of did it the way I heard it, which is decontextualized.
Yeah. For me, unlike a self-tape, I found that my imagination created very vivid images of where I saw myself, where I was headed during seeking out my husband. So I found myself wanting to create those images, but I'm not experienced as a filmmaker to, you know, sort of create that sense of going down into a basement, dark basement with a flashlight looking for this human being. So I just found my imagination way more active in terms of place, character, and action than I would have if I were doing a regular self-tape for commercial or TV.
And it shows in the work, and we're just about to go to those videos and watch them, because the work, I have to say, it from everybody just exceeded my expectations entirely. Does anybody else have anything to say, or should we go ahead and watch the video? The video is about 20 minutes long with all of the monologues, so it'll just give us a little bit of time to sit back and watch everybody's work. Yeah, Melissa, can we go ahead and do that?
This admiration, sir, is much the savor of other your new pranks. I do beseech you to understand my purposes aright. As you are old and reverend, you should be wise. Here do you keep 100 knights, and squires. Men so disordered, so debauched and bold, that this our court, infected with their manners, shows like a riotous inn. Epicurism and lust make it more like a tavern or brothel than a graced palace. The shame itself doth speak for instant remedy. Be then desired by her that else will take the thing she begs, a little to disquantity your train, and the remainders that shall still depend, to be such men as may besort your age, which know themselves and you.
Oh, my good Lord, why are you thus alone? To what offense have I this fortnight been a banished woman from my Harry's bed? Tell me, sweet Lord, what is't that takes from thee thy stomach pleasure and thy golden sleep? Why hast thou lost the fresh blood in thy cheeks, and given my treasures and my rights to thee to thick-eyed musing and cursed melancholy? In thy faint slumbers, I by thee have watched, and heard thee murmur tales of iron wars, speak terms of manage to thy bounden steed, cry, courage to the field! Thy spirit in thee hath been so at war, and thus hath so bestirred thee in thy sleep, that beads of sweat have stood upon thy brow like bubbles in a late disturbed stream. Some heavy business hath my lord at hand, and I must know it, or else he loves me not.
As strange as the thing I know not. It were as possible to say I loved nothing so well as you, but believe me not, and yet I lie not, I confess nothing, nor deny nothing. I am sorry for my cousin. I'm gone though I'm here. There is no love in you. Nay, I pray you, let me go. Is he not approved in the height a villain that hath slandered, scorned, dishonoured my kinswoman? That I were a man. What? Bear her in hand until they come to take hands, and then with public accusation, uncovered slander, unmitigated rancor. God, that I were a man. I would eat his heart in the marketplace. Sweet hero, she is wronged. She is slandered. She is undone. Princes and counties. Surely a princely testimony, a goodly count, Count Convect, or sweet gallant, surely. That I were a man for his sake, or that I had any friend, would be a man for my sake. But manhood is melted into courtesies, valour into compliment, and men are only turned to tongue and trim ones too. He is as valiant as Hercules that only tells a lie and swears it. I cannot be a man with wishing, Therefore I will die, a woman with grieving.
The quality of mercy is not strained. It droppeth as the gentle rain from heaven upon the place beneath. It is twice blessed. It blesseth him that gives and him that takes. 'Tis mightiest in the mightiest. It becomes the throned monarch better than his crown. His scepter shows the force of temporal power, the attribute to awe and majesty wherein doth sit the dread and fear of kings. But mercy is above this sceptred sway. It is enthroned in the hearts of kings. It is an attribute to God himself, and earthly power doth then show likest God's, when mercy seasons justice. Therefore, Jew, though justice be thy plea, consider this, that in the course of justice none of us should see salvation. We do pray for mercy. And that same prayer doth teach us all to render the deeds of mercy. I have spoke thus much to mitigate the justice of thy plea, which if thou follow, this strict court of Venice must needs give sentence against the merchant there.
Was I for this nigh wrecked upon the sea, and twice by awkward wind from America's bank drove back again into my native clime? What boded this but well forewarning wind did seem to say, seek not a scorpion's nest, nor set no footing on this unkind shore. What did I then but curse the gentle gust, and he that loosed them forth their brazen caves, and bid them blow toward any blessed shore, or turn our stern upon a dreadful rock? The pretty vaulting sea refused to drown me, knowing that thou wouldst have me drowned on shore, with tears as salt as sea through thy unkindness. Splitting rocks cowered in the sinking sand, and would not dash me with their ragged sides, because thy flinty heart, more hard than they, might in thy homeland perish. Breonna Taylor, Atiano Jefferson, Sandra Bland. When from thy shore the tempest beat us back, I stood upon the hatches in the storm. I took a costly jewel from my neck, a heart it was, bound in with diamonds, and threw it towards thy land. The sea received it, and so I wished thy country might my heart. Ay me, I can no more die Jim Crow, for dawn doth weep that thou dost live so long.
I am glad to see your highness.
I pray you, sir, take patience. I cannot think my sister in the least would fail in her obligation. It is my hope you less know how to value her desert than she to scant her duty. Sir, you are old, Nature in you stands on the very verge of her confine. You should be ruled and led by some discretion that discerns your state better than you yourself. Therefore I pray you to my sister you do make return. Say that you have wronged her. Good sir, no more. These are unsightly tricks. If, till the expiration of your month, you will return and sojourn with my sister, dismissing half your train, then come to me. What? 50 followers? Is that not well? What should you need of more? I looked not for you yet, nor am provided for your fit welcome. Oh, to wilful men! The injuries that they themselves procure must be their schoolmasters.
Love is merely a madness, and I tell you, deserves a well-dark house and a whip, as madmen do. And the reason why they are not so punished and cured is that the lunacy is so ordinary. The whippers are in love too. Yet, I profess curing it by counsel. He was to imagine me his love, his mistress, and I set him every day to woo me. At which time would I, being but a moonish youth, grieve, be effeminate, unchangeable, longing and liking, proud, fantastical, apish, shallow, inconstant, full of tears, full of smiles. For every passion something, and for no passion, truly anything. For boys and women are, for the most part, cattle of this color. Now like him, now loathe him, then entertain him, then forswear him. Now weep for him, then spit at him. That I drove my suitor from his mad humor of love to a living humor of madness, which was to forswear the full stream of the world and live in a nook merely monastic. And thus I cured him. And in this way would I take upon me to wash your liver as clean as a sound sheep's heart, that there shall not be one spot of love in it. I would cure you, if you would but call me Rosalind, and come every day to my coat, and woo me.
What studied torments, tyrant, hast for me? What wheels, racks, fires, what flaying, boiling in leads or oils? What old or newer torture must I receive, whose every word deserves to taste of thy most worst? Thy tyranny, together working with thy jealousies, fancies too weak for boys, too green and idle for girls of 9. Oh, think what they have done, and then run mad indeed, stark mad. For all thy bygone fooleries were but spices of it. That thou betrayedst Polixenes, 'twas nothing. That did but show thee of a fool, inconstant and damnable, ingrateful. Nor was't much. Thou wouldst have poisoned good Camillo's honor, to have him kill a king. Poor trespasses, more monstrous standing by, whereof I reckon the casting forth to crows thy baby daughter, to be or none or little, though a devil would have shed water out of fire ere done. Nor is it directly laid to thee the death of the young prince, whose honorable thoughts high for one so tender, cleft the heart that could conceive a gross and foolish sire, blemished his gracious dam. This is not no. Laid to thy answer, but the last. When I have said, cry, woe. The queen, the sweets, dearest creatures dead, and vengeance for it not dropped down yet.
Words, vows, gifts, tears, and love's full sacrifice he offers in another's enterprise. But more in Troilus, thousandfold I see than in the glass of Pandar's praise may be. Yet hold I off. Women are angels, wooing. Things won are done. Joy's soul lies in the doing. That she beloved knows not that knows not this. Men prize the thing ungained more than it is. That she was never yet that ever knew love got so sweet as when desire did sue. Therefore, this maxim out of love I teach. Achievement is command. Ungained, beseech. Then, though my heart's contents full love doth bear, nothing of that shall in mine eyes appear.
If you'd like to make a call, please hang up and try again. If you need help, hang up and then dial your operator.
Sit down. Set down your honorable load, if honor may be shrouded in a hearse. Most I a while obsequiously lament the untimely fall of virtuous Lancaster. Poor, key-cold figure of a holy king. Pale ashes of the house of Lancaster, thou bloodless remnant of that royal blood. Be it lawful that I invocate thy ghost, to hear the lamentations of poor Anne, wife to thy Edward, to thy slaughtered son, stabbed by the self-same hand that made these wounds. Lo, in these windows that let forth thy life, I pour the helpless balm of my poor eyes. Cursed be the hand that made these fatal holes. Cursed be the heart that had the heart to do it. Cursed the blood that let this blood from hence. More direful hap betide that hated wretch that makes us wretched by the death of thee, that I can wish to adders, spiders, toads, or any creeping venomed thing that lives. If ever he have child, abortive be it, prodigious and untimely natural brought to light, and that be heir to his unhappiness, whose ugly and unnatural aspect may fright the hopeful mother at the view. If ever he have wife, let her be made a miserable by the death of him, as I am made by my poor lord and thee. What, do you tremble? Are you afeard? Alas, I blame you not, for you are mortal, and mortal eyes cannot endure the devil. And still, as you are weary of the weight, rest you, while I lament King Henry's course.
And now we're all back. Lovely. Thank you all so much. It's such excellent work. I can't stop watching that. So the question is, are our souls our own? And for anybody who's watching who doesn't understand the premise, there is in Henry V, when he is dressed as a soldier and disguised is an interesting subject that I want to touch on as well. He says to the other soldiers, every subject's duty is the king's, but every subject's soul is his own. And that made me wonder, for Shakespeare's women, are our souls our own? And I'm going to open that up to you guys so that you can answer. And if you're on mute, go ahead and take yourself off of mute. And we're just going to open up the discussion. You're also right.
I'm happy to start. For Portia in Merchant, I think yes is the answer for her, actually. I think yes, and I think she's really ultimately the rescuer and the hero in this play in a way that is rarer in the canon. But I do think that she's certainly the best equipped and least indebted person, I think, in Merchant. And she is obedient, certainly, but her fulfillment of what she needs, what she's promised to do actually comes fairly early in the play. Like, don't tell which casket is the right casket. And then, so then I feel like that then it enables her, when she's like fulfilled that obligation, that she's able to protect the things that are crucial to her, and the things that she's gained, and she is successful at it to a large degree.
It's interesting because that idea of disguise, I was thinking of both Portia and Rosalind, in that in Shakespeare's plays, when men don disguises, like the Duke in Measure for Measure and like Henry in Henry V, when men don disguises, it is to absolve themselves of power, so that they aren't empowered and they aren't responsible and they're walking among commoners. But when women dress as men, it's to gain the power that they don't have as women. Rosalind does it and Portia does it. And it was interesting to me thinking about that in terms of men disguise themselves to lose power and women disguise themselves to gain power. Because that piece that you did is when she's dressed as a man and she's pretending to be a man, and everyone sees her as a man, so she can speak truth to power in the same way that Rosalind can speak the truth about love because she's dressed as a man. And that is an interesting aspect of this as well. So do we have that freedom as women? And Aveen, yes, I am looking at you.
I know, because Beatrice is from Much Ado About Nothing is particular. She's a special character in the canon, probably because I've played a few, and I think we've all played a few female roles and male, because I played Petruchio as well. And I feel like she's the most equipped to reject social norms than most female Shakespeare characters written by Shakespeare. So there's this sense that she rejects love, rejects marriage, rejects her role as a woman quite vehemently until, she's intrigued for the first time, by someone. And
she lives. That's the specific.
Yeah, that she lives. Yeah, and that I feel like this. The it's not necessarily a speech, but the piece I performed is probably, it feels like the most vulnerable version of her in the whole piece, because for the first time you get to see just the surface crack. This idea that Beatrice lives through her whole life having said, I don't think I'll marry, or I'm not interested, and always passing that responsibility off to another woman. And, so almost a modern version of a lot of the women in Shakespeare's world. And then this man's before her, and you get to see that she realizes her place as a woman outwardly. It's the first time that she vocalizes it by saying hero is through hero's demise. She's seeing that they're all actually, she can do all she wants to reject the status or the status quo, but she's still a woman, and men have the power. And it's so devastating, because when I first read that play, I always wanted to play her, and thankfully Stephanie gave me that opportunity. And I remember thinking, oh, she's so amazing. And you get to that point and you go, oh, she's still a woman in that world. So yeah, I don't know if her soul is her own. I think that she has her own soul and she wants it, and she'll hang on to it with every bit of her, but then it can get taken from her any moment, which is what's sad about it. Yeah. I don't know if I answered your question, Stephanie, or scratch that itch.
Please, anybody else, go ahead and pipe up. It is a discussion.
Yeah, I empathize with that. When I was doing the research into Margaret, there's Margaret of Anjou, the historical character, and then there's Shakespeare's Margaret, which are two different women in many respects, but both I feel severely abused, actually. So when I got the question, I remember thinking, well, of course our souls are our own. We all have our own. But that really wasn't her question, I think, in the play. It was a matter of survival. When she talks about, a nest of scorpions and landing in the warring nobles, a fully fledged, intelligent, witty woman, knowing politics and jousting and everything that she knew. And yet, like you say, all she was expected in that world was to be a consort, to have a child, and to be, what is the word, intercession for the king. So I just, and then when I remember when I got to that monologue, thinking of what's going on today with in this country with BLM, and going, so is our soul our own? And do we have one if people don't think we have a soul?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's Margaret's issue too, is that she's so busy doing what she has to do to survive that my initial instinct is, yes, of course, it's our own. We have our own, and no one can take that. That's the one thing no one can take from us. But over a period of abuse and negating and gaslighting, I don't know that something isn't lost. I would feel very sad if I thought that our soul could be lost, but I fear that it can be. I don't know the answer.
It's a big question. Yeah, but it is meant to make us think about this, because, like, for me, look at Shakespeare's women, they always are sort of off to the side, because the trajectory and the action of the play is always a man's action. We never actually, and I don't do this as a director, is we never look at the full lives of the women. And Margaret in particular is a very interesting character, because she's in more plays than any other character. She's in 4 of his plays. And I find one of the things that I find interesting about Margaret, and this will go to one of Linda's questions about Regan and Goneril, is she's called a she-devil and a she-witch and all of these kinds of things. And she is just as much a warrior as Bolingbroke was. She's fighting for her son, and Bolingbroke is never disparaged for his warlike attitude, and Margaret is undone by how people think of her, because she fought for her son in a way that her husband wouldn't.
Right, exactly. And it seems to me that when Shakespeare's women tell the truth, they're either killed or banished. So
exactly. And that's part of this too, is in looking at Lear and looking at Regan and Goneril and even Cordelia, they all die. And they all do their duty in their own specific way, and yet they all die. So it can't be that there's something wrong with those women. It has to be that there's something wrong with the world of the play. I'm going to shut up now and let you guys talk some more. Sorry.
Yeah, I'll just add. I took a look at Lady Percy as, yes, she does have a soul of her own, though hindered, though stifled from fully expressing because of the world that she lives in. But I was fascinated by more about the fact behind the scenes that I saw her as someone who wanted to be in on the strategizing, feeling left out, not so much being pushed away by her husband on an emotional level. Yes, that, but more so being pushed away from being a part of strategizing for in the political game and in position. So I feel that because of feeling hindered by this world that she lives in, that she was savvy at being able to navigate politically behind the scenes.
Yeah, and I wonder too, for you and for Dawn, because you are playing historical figures. if there's anything in that, because I wonder if the way that he wrote historical women is just a little bit different than the imagined women.
Well, yes. I mean, definitely. I mean, he places Margaret and puts in her hands the knife that kills Rutland, and she wasn't on the battle. I mean, the real Margaret wasn't on the field that day, so it just didn't happen that way. So it was really something to do the research in, you know, and I only had one time up to bat, and so with Shakespeare, you need several. You need several times. It's not even a year, and I'm already going, I could have. But doing the research, I kind of fell in love with her, and I learned so much about the difference between how women were educated in France at that time and how women were educated in England at that time, and I really also looked at her as an immigrant queen. And people go, "Oh, not France and England in that time," but I mean, she was in a different world. They were educated differently. They read different books. It was a different culture. And so she was an other. She was an outsider. And, the marriage caused strife amongst the nobles. And there were things, obviously, that were true. But then also of the time, they had to, Shakespeare, she was also vilified. And then made to be the cause of the War of the Roses, which is simply just not the case. So, it was. For me, there was a vast difference between the two, and Stefan Wolfert and I wrote our adaptation was called She-Wolf, and we looked at Margaret without the War of the Roses, which was so we extrapolated her story and didn't tell the story of the men. And that really made it very evident to me, not only her son, but what she was fighting for and what it cost her.
And I'm sorry, because Caitlin, you're also playing a historical character, because Lady Anne is also historical.
Yeah, I was going to say that I think with Anne in particular, and I think with the historic women, there's a different sense of duty. And there's this almost heightened sense of duty that we are bound to. Lady Anne from birth was set to be queen. And so when Edward is killed, that's her trajectory. And so I think it's really easy for her, of course there's complicated emotions behind it, but I think that it's easy for her to still have that in mind. And so when Richard takes the throne, that's what she has in mind. She's been raised to be queen. So so that is her duty. It's not the duty of necessarily a wife and a mother, but it is the duty to be a queen. And I think that she is bound to that and doesn't have the same freedoms as maybe some of the fictional women to really understand what it is to be a woman, because that's not her first priority. Queen is her first priority. And to be the side of a ruler is her first priority. And we don't get to explore a lot of her feelings in any other way except for how she feels about the dead king and her husband who should have been king, and now her new husband who is going to be king. And then again, she gets set aside when she as queen is no longer wanted.
Which goes back Cressida's thing of things wanted, or and then once they're had, we like, I got her. Okay.
Yep.
Anyone else? Because I want to dovetail into Goneril and Regan in this, and then also go to our next question as well. So are Goneril and Regan souls their own?
Am I unmuted? I guess I'm. Sis, I have to tell you, no. I started, my point of view has changed. At first, I thought Regan and Goneril, before I started exploring this and had the opportunity, I thought they were one and the same women. And when I started to explore Regan, I realized here's a woman that's caught in between. Not even, her narcissistic father, who actually brings us in and says, I'm going to give you my kingdom, I'm going to divide it up, but first you have to tell me how much you love me. So not about how much I love you as a father, how much you love me. And depending on how we answer is how much land we get. And the youngest of our sisters, of course, answers truthfully, and she's banished. And then when we're giving the lands, King Lear actually just talks to our husbands, not even ourselves. So that land passes kind of over ourselves to our husbands. And then my sister, my older sister, is more powerful. She convinces me to try to push my father away. And then, of course, King Lear comes to visit me, and I push him away. He curses me. And eventually, it is, Shakespeare has it that, I die. And I never, ever am allowed to find my own life in this. And I think that's what I'm investigating, what Shakespeare maybe even was investigating, is here's a woman who starts out not having a voice in society, can't go beyond that on her own like other women, or dress, into a man to voice herself, that she eventually, all that world caves in on her and she's gone. So no, her soul is not her own.
Linda?
Well, little sister. I was checking to see if Dr. Kelly, Baron Kelly, who's directing King Lear, is on this and listening to this. One of the things about King Lear, about the sisters, is I always feel when I've seen it, it's like they need no introduction. Everybody in the audience knows there's the two evil Cinderella stepsisters, and it kind of pisses me off, to be perfectly blunt, because I think they're more complicated than that. And I think it's complicated by the fact that they're women in the Elizabethan picture. And, I've always felt, with due respect to all the King Lear productions I've seen, and I've seen a couple, that they're kind of like badly adjusted women going through bad menopause. And I think that is elementary at best, and a little bit assuming. Not that Dr. Kelly would do that. He's texting me as I speak. But I think they're more complicated. I had a very wonderful relationship and a complicated relationship with my father. And I think the Goneril really loves King Lear, but it's incredibly complicated. That's the fact I'm a woman. And is my soul my own? Is it our own? No. And I cheated. I put it in Google search, and I put the line in for Midsummer, my soul is in the sky, and all these graphics came up with flying schools, aviation schools, which is interesting to me, about the image of like the soul. You see it and fly to it, and maybe you can't get to it. And I do think, for me, investigating this character, I have to look at what I am labeled as, what I'm denied, what I have a right to. And it's complicated. So I think at times I touch my soul, but I think at times it leaves me. And I think it leaves me in King Lear, and I don't quite know.
Rosalind, Cressida?
Sure. Cressida is so complex. I mean, I'm still kind of working through that in my brain, and I was as I was revisiting the play yesterday. But I think ultimately, yes, in the sense she knows exactly what world she's living in, and she has a very clear-eyed view of her reality, and she does, like several of the other characters we've talked about at this point, she does what she needs to do to survive and not necessarily thrive. I mean, no one really thrives in this play. But then you see her, like when she's exchanged for Antenor and goes to the Greeks, and the kissing, everyone is kissing her, and she sort of denies Menelaus his kiss. And so it's like, yeah, you're doing it. You're standing up for yourself. But then that is when words like whore start being bandied around about her. Like Ulysses has this whole speech after she leaves that like, oh, she's one of those women having opinions and such. And so like, that's when people really start talking about her. And then of course, like things go downhill from there. So I think yes and no, and then especially no if souls and bodies are like, if we're talking, are more or less the same, Yeah, I don't know. I'm conflicted. I could write 2 very different essays on this question about her. So.
Yeah, and understandably, and the question is meant not to have an answer. It's meant to be a question that causes us to explore. Oh, have we ever thought about the fact? Do women? Because I think our default is, of course, we have our own. Of course, our souls are our own. But do we have the ability and the impetus to say what we want and get it as women and as Shakespeare's characters? Do they? And it's always a revelation, and at the same time, it's always really, really sad to me that the slut shaming in Much Ado About Nothing is still prevalent today. The slut shaming of Cressida is still prevalent today. All of that stuff is still prevalent today. So we haven't gone anywhere in 400 years. We haven't made any. It feels like we haven't made any leeway because his plays are still so damn relevant in regards to where we stand as women. I mean, it's wonderful to have his language to play with and his plays to play with, but at the same time, it's also a little disappointing to go, really? We're still here? We're still in the same predicament? And the only thing is that we don't get to dress up as men and around. Although I think the millennials are giving us that opportunity, and maybe we should take it. Does anybody else have anything else on that question? Melissa, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Not exactly. I mean, I'm going to agree with a lot of the other people who were saying that yes and no. And I think, especially in the pastoral plays with like Rosalind and the women that dress up as men, their souls are their own, but they're also having to deviate from that and kind of put on a show. So in that sense, no, because they can't be themselves to survive. They have to be this whole other person. So I don't know. It's a complicated question, and one that I'm actually not even sure how to answer properly. So.
And again, I'm less interested in an answer than I am in the exploration of, well, there's this, but then there's also this, because there's a ton of contradiction as well in Shakespeare, and that sort of dovetails into the next thing, which is why do we have such a difficulty with the contradictions of women? No one has any problem with the contradictions of Hamlet. And Andress, I know you've played Hamlet, so you understand what that is. But we go, yeah, Hamlet's a complicated character and he's full of contradictions, and we have no problem with that. But when women are complicated and contradictory, and this might be a matter for directors of, we smooth out that contradiction to make them more palatable to an audience.
I don't know. Hamlet drives me nuts. Like I'm not on his side. I can't stand it. And I've done that. I'm just being honest. I did play him, and then in another production, that was our companion piece to Joan, I played 11 roles in that play, including both the women, which I think the women in that play, Gertrude especially, it's interesting that nobody did, well, she doesn't really actually get that much to say. Yeah, I mean, the conflict in her is far more interesting to me than the conflict in him at the end of the day, for me. And poor Ophelia is just sort of a casualty of the whole thing. Yeah, sorry. It's interesting. I'm like, the more we're talking about this, the souls piece, like especially with the pants roles, it feels like the answer somehow is yes, but it's almost like it's a lack of agency, that they have to put on pants to have any agency.
Yeah. And that's a real thing. I mean, I think in Shakespeare's in Shakespeare's day, and of course you're still talking about men who are playing women, because women weren't even allowed on stage. But in Shakespeare's day, it's, you have to dress up as a man to be heard. And in our day, it's almost like you have to yell and scream and jump up and down, become shrill to be heard. And then you get labeled as being shrill because you jumped up and down to be heard. It's like a sword in this way. And there's something about that as well. I'm going to dovetail this into the next kind of question, which is, do Shakespeare's women have the right to ask for what is genuinely theirs without being labeled? And I just sort of went into that, and that question was particularly for Regan and Goneril, but are the women that each of you played, and we can bring in other women, we can talk about Gertrude, because she's a very interesting character as one of Shakespeare's women, but do Shakespeare's women get to ask what is genuinely theirs? And I actually almost want to dovetail to Kimberly, because your monologue, that's exactly what your monologue is about.
Yeah, I think they have a right to ask for what they want, and despite labels and being denied and ignored, yeah, I think they will do what, in certain cases, certain women will do what they have to do to manipulate or work in whatever way to get what they want.
Yeah, Linda, did you want to jump in on that one?
Oh, am I not muted? I'm sorry.
No, you're speaking. We can hear you.
I think that everyone has a right to ask for what they need and want and deserve and are entitled to. And the very fact that they do ask women in the canon and in other places creates conflict and creates a narrative of labels and sometimes judgment. But I think that the event of asking for what you need huge for Shakespeare's women. They don't always get it, you know. And you know, I had the opportunity to work with Lisa Volpe at the Los Angeles Women's Shakespeare Company, which I'm very thankful for. And one of the things that really informed my work, not only was her wonderful expertise, but also the very fact that I was a woman playing a role and speaking the words that were written for a man kind of changed the trajectory for myself when I thought about asking for what I need. And it informed this question, and I'm probably not explaining it as well as I want to, and I apologize. But
I think Avine probably could dovetail into that one as well, because I know that playing Petruchio certainly had an impact on her.
I mean, yeah, the kind of like, okay, I don't have to think about asking for what I need. I'm just going to friggin' say what I want, you know? I mean, I played a really despicable character for the most part, Rodrigo in Othello. He's just a horrible human being. But he asks for what he needs. He's just yeah. But anyways, it was kind of empowering. In a really kind of offensive way. Oh, I get it now. So, you know, and, you know, not to judge him, but I will. You know, that kind of event, having those words in my mouth, I mean, the way he talked about women and just his his assumptions, that kind of really informed my work. And then I remember thinking, I can't wait to play a woman again. I cannot wait. I wanted to take a bath and wash out my mouth, brush my teeth really hard to get Rodrigo out of me. I was so happy. I think the next thing I played was Gertrude, which was not the best thing to play because she has a really hard time speaking the truth. But at least I felt like, wow, this is informing the next level of speaking a part that was written for a woman. Anyways, Avine, I'm sure you got a lot to say about.
Do you know what? When I played Petruchio, one of the most defining moments in rehearsal for me was when Stephanie asked me to stop apologizing in my body, in the way I share the space with people, because I think that women, I'm not saying that male actors don't do that, but I think that the text demanded that I stop caring about what everybody else thought and just do the thing. And that took a lot of adjustment because I'm a woman in this world. And then I played not Shakespeare, but only recently I played Widow Quinn in an Irish classic play of the Western world. And I remember understanding that this character had a bit more of Petruchio in her because she took up space without apologizing. And it was really helpful to have understood that I don't do that. You know, I don't do that naturally, necessarily. I mean, I'm certainly not afraid of taking up space, but maybe a little more apologetic than my male counterparts. But I also have to say, having played Helena in A Midsummer Night's Dream, I don't think I've ever played a character that asks so clearly for what she wants. And in fact, I would say she demands it. You know, when she asked Demetrius to why she's so confused. Why does he not want her? And it's really enjoyable to play a character that doesn't sugarcoat it, you know, and she just says, you know, I want you, and I don't understand what the problem is, and that's really fun to play. And then Petruchio obviously does that without ever having to raise his voice. He just does it, you know, and I think it probably informed me as a person, never mind an actor, you know, that it made me aware of what I do in meetings, in auditions, in life. Yeah, maybe it's changed me forever. I don't know.
And there are, you know, studies in America now that show that the social engineering is still engineering women into silence. So the studies specifically show that as women progress through school age, they raise their hand less and less than their male counterparts, even though they know the answer. So the interesting thing is, in the work of adapting and decontextualizing Shakespeare for audiences, my husband and I work with veterans in Decruit, is that is both the power of the age. Shakespeare was writing for his time, and we look at what that means for us now, and the ways where they meet, where those things are the same. The silencing, the apologizing, the smothering of women's voices, especially if they tell the truth. It's empowering in a way for at least the veterans that we work with, and because they see that they're not alone, that these questions they're wrestling with were questions that were wrestled with that long ago. But then, as you said, Stephanie, too, it's also striking when I'm looking at this study showing that we're still somehow in our educational institutions still engineering for girls to raise their hand less and less, even though they know the answer. And the same studies, math, science, the same. It's also strikingly sad to look at all of that. Yes, of course we have the right, but what are we doing with it? I mean, it's the right doesn't mean we're not being labeled as troublemakers, and the labels change, the euphemisms for the names change, but it's still the same in many ways, which makes me look at the institution differently.
Yeah. Even I would have to add on to that, Dawn, in the investigation with King Lear, and even the politics today. Sometimes women are cursed. Sometimes women are put down, and it continues today. And even in COVID, and unfortunately, women are losing their jobs because primarily they're the caretakers, or that's what's happening. So it's amazing that Shakespeare is able to illuminate this as human behavior, and that it continues today, that we have to be vigilant in trying to change or to have equal pay as for women and for what women do.
And I'll give you another example that I've been wrestling with a woman that we haven't brought up today, but I'm looking, Stefan and I are doing a 2-person adaptation of Macbeth. And Lady M, I constantly, as I was reading and learning and being cast and working on Shakespeare, I constantly heard one word always attached to her, and the one-word description of Macbeth, which is Lady M nags her husband into murdering this king. Now, because my husband is an Army veteran, so therefore Lady Percy is very dear to me. But because he is an Army veteran, and because I work with veterans, I know just how successful nagging your husband to do anything would actually be. Macbeth is described as this heroic, feats in, cutting from the nave to the chest and cutting his head off and doing all of the stuff. And yet the whole thing hinges on this woman, right? So, but scholars, a lot of people describe Lady M as a snag, as if she had no life prior, no mention of the loss of the baby that might drive her, no mention of Banquo and Macbeth and the king's son and all of their ambition. They have monologues speaking about their ambition, but Lady M is this ambitious nag. And if it weren't for her, the whole thing wouldn't happen. It's just we need to look at some of these constructs that we have, I think, and ideas that we have, and where they were derived from, and what do we think of all of that now, and what are we perpetuating? And if we believe these women are indeed more complex, then I think it's incumbent upon us to show that, to direct that, to cast that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that brings up something, because the Shakespeare's writing is rich and diverse, and I mean, like, even looking at Goneril and Regan, who are constantly thought of as these wicked stepsisters, they're not. When you look at what they say and how they feel about their father and how they feel about everything, and how they articulate it, it's not that at all. And yet they're still reduced to these two evil women, you know? Or even like Ophelia being sort of tossed off as like this substanceless, you know, I don't even know what she's tossed off as, but that she's one-dimensional and she's substanceless. And oh my God, that woman she's rich. She's rich, and she shows that the world has gone to hell in a handbasket. She's the beacon that basically shows that there is something terribly rotten in Denmark while everybody else is dealing with their own stuff. Yeah, it's fascinating to me, and I'm a little fascinated too by I'm of an age, so what I'm seeing with some of the younger actresses that I have worked with is that they have such a narrow idea of what it means to be a woman and what it means to be feminine, that they almost can't step into Shakespeare's full depth of femininity and women characters, because we've been told that being a woman means that you wear pink and you're about fluffy things and makeup. And Shakespeare's women are not that. When you really look at what they are and what they say, they're almost more complex than the men. They're just on stage much less.
I think that they're often more complex than the men, because the men get to just want something, and whatever it is, and do it, and the women have to work in a million ways to get anything done. Also, for the record, I didn't mean to suggest that Ophelia is that there's nothing to her. I just feel like she's just, man, of all of the ladies in all of the plays, she just never had a fighting chance. Just something that pure, and can't survive that play.
No, and I wasn't actually even commenting on what you've said. I was commenting on, I hear that all the time, and then I got to see Mega's Hamlet in New York just before lockdown, and it was an Irish production. I mean, I'm not sure if you saw it because it was here at the Gate, but the woman who played Ophelia she stole the show. I mean, she was unbelievable, and I suddenly made the connection between the Porter scene in Macbeth and Ophelia going mad, because she is the death knell, and she opens up the gates to hell. And it was done that way. And she unnerved everyone in that play. She takes everyone in that play to a completely different level. And I thought, oh, finally, somebody has done Ophelia, has directed Ophelia, and there's an actress who is fulfilling Ophelia in the way that the play is written. And that's the thing, is that Shakespeare's written plays that allow women to have more oomph. Now we see them, they die for it in some cases. I mean, you know, or they're in the comedies, they're rewarded for it, but in the tragedies and the histories, they die for it. But the way that they're written is complete. It's just the way that we produce them sometimes is incomplete. Mm-hmm. Makes sense?
I think that makes sense.
Yeah, when it's almost like we have to be vigilant, even with our young actresses, to feel the organic, because Shakespeare grew up in the country, in the nature, and was very instinctual, and that's what he puts a lot in his women. They're intellectual, they're perceptive above the men. They know what's going on, or they sense what's going on, and I think as we get further away from our own sensing organs, or young women are not allowed to think for themselves or perceive what they're feeling is something to honor. That's something that Shakespeare can give back to us.
Yeah, I mean, I find it interesting in Romeo and Juliet and in The Tempest, both Miranda and Juliet are the ones that ask the men to marry them. They take that into their own hands, and it's like nobody ever talks about the fact that Juliet is the one that actually proposes marriage to Romeo, and nobody talks about Miranda doing the same in The Tempest, and they do. They totally go, yeah, let's get married. They know. There's no question, and they both also do the honorable thing. So that leads me to another question. Is the demise of women and this goes back to Lear as well because of the bastard, are women in Shakespeare's plays undone by their own dishonor, or are they dishonored by men and then have to pay the price for it?
I mean, for Cressida, at least the second one, I think. I mean, she, as much as she needs to, she plays by the rules of the world. She does what she has to do while still trying to get what she wants. And if the play ended in, after Act 3, she would have gotten what she wanted and everything would be fine. But then, because men want what they want, she becomes a pawn and loses what agency we see her have. Kind of, I don't know, I'm reminded of, when you mentioned Miranda and Juliet, I'm reminded of in the wooing scene in Act 3, where Troilus and Cressida are finally face-to-face and talking, she complains, like she's upset that, women don't have men's privilege of speaking first about feelings. And this is sort of going off of the question that you asked, but yeah, I mean, she knows exactly what world she's living in. So I don't know that and then unlike Troilus, who has the privilege of being angry at how she handles herself in the Greek camp and how she relates with Diomed, she doesn't even get the option to be angry about what happens to her. I mean, she says she won't go from Troy, but then the next scene we see her in, she's acquiesced to that demand, and then she can't, even be angry about what's happening to her. She just has to go with it because men. And this send up of masculinity that is Troilus and Cressida. So.
And I do think we do need to be a little bit careful about and there is a difference between patriarchy, which men are also subjected to, and men who use patriarchy for their own personal gains, because they are two different things. Because men are they are subjugated just as much by the ideal of patriarchy as women are. They just have more agency within that. But there are men that then take it on themselves to use that privilege for their own personal ends and their own personal gains, and those are the ones we usually call assholes. Sorry, America, I'm Irish, we swear. The other thing I just want to throw out there, and this might be interesting, is I'm not sure if everybody knows this, but in Elizabethan times, women were considered to be unemotional and cold-hearted. In fact, there's a couple of references to women being cold-hearted in Much Ado About Nothing. But women were thought to be cold-hearted and unfeeling. And it's interesting because we don't look at women like that because we're looking at them through the prism of now. But if you think of Shakespeare's women, do you think of them as being cold-hearted and unfeeling? Because that does mean that they would be more analytical and intellectual than emotional.
I would say, like Beatrice, obviously is so verbose, so intelligent, so witty, so intuitive that it's very hard not to think of Emma Thompson, in my mind anyway, when you think of her, because she's such a naturally funny, intelligent person. But it's very hard to believe that that's what Shakespeare felt of the women, and that he felt that they were cold-hearted, because quite a lot of them are very it's very hard to be that intuitive and not have warmth, to respond to a space, to give people what they think they want. And in Beatrice's case, she's so forward-thinking, and she's so all-feeling when it comes to Hero and Benedict as well. Obviously, she hides it, but yeah, like it's hard to marry the two thoughts, that perhaps did Shakespeare know something that the other Elizabethans didn't know? Did he? Or maybe it's because we are performing these women through our own modern prism of women, and we understand that we are, and also we have to take for granted as well that we've gone through a whole phase in history that we are shrill and silly, and that we don't have what it takes to run a country, etc., etc. But obviously we do. I mean, there's a lot of stuff happening in Ireland now with the mother and baby homes. I don't know if anyone else in this forum has heard about this, but it's a really horrendous part of our recent history. And women in Ireland, not unlike Hero in Much Ado, actually, had to play a lot of tricks on their own communities to keep their babies, to be in love, to be beautiful. A lot of beautiful women were sent, and genuinely some women, just for being very attractive, were sent to these places, these homes that if anyone is doesn't know about it, it's basically a place where you go to have children out of wedlock. And as it turns out, children died there, women died there, were abused. And I mean, I'm probably responding to the last question and not this one in this, but yeah, that there's a lot of feeling about what it means to be a woman at the moment in Ireland. So it's hard not to think about that at the moment, today, right now.
I just wanted to add, and Marissa's not here, but she did Paulina from The Winter's Tale. And when I think of her feeling intelligent, compassionate, and really brave woman, smart, and she speaks from her heart, and she also speaks to the king and puts him in his place. And I don't know, I always think for myself, the only way I can get into these kind of that they're cold-hearted and they're warm-hearted, they're good, they're bad, they're funny, they're sad. That the boundaries for me have to be the opportunity for them to be huge in order for me to kind of live in their soul or their bodies. And I keep hearing a word that comes up, which I think is really important for me that I hear, and is the word agency. And maybe in a really horrible way, if women are labeled, denied, judged, that they become the in a way. It doesn't always work. But the awareness of that. Some maybe others. I learned to speak years ago by going to an all-women's college. I'll never forget that. I'll never forget that experience. And, like, I was like, oh, you're going to go to an all-women's college. I learned to find my voice there in a way that I've never forgotten that experience. And there were a lot of men professors at that college that just their very presence helped me find my voice, in spite of them sometimes, and because of them sometimes. And that, I think Aveen said something about in meetings, that has really informed everything for me as a professor, where I teach and being in the room as an educator, feeling that I have to speak to certain things that I have a right to. And if somebody says to me, well, you don't need to say that anymore, I go, well, the very fact that you say to me, I don't need to say it anymore, I'm going to say it. And I'm going to say it louder. Because the fact that you say to me, it's not necessary to say that anymore, actually constitutes the fact that it's really necessary for me to repeat it, and that's not a judgment. It's just something that, I mean, to give voice to the voiceless. I mean, to speak, to feel like you have the right to speak your truth. Men as well in Shakespeare, but I think of Paulina because I think she's like so strong and courageous. And we're entering into a place, hopefully, where we will restore the moral compass to some degree that has been stripped through our bodies for many years. And that moral compass may very well be in the form of a really powerful woman who is in a position for that. And if anybody says to me anything about her wearing a pantsuit, I'm going to lose my shit. Because that kind of stuff is like, and it's not because but I do think we still suffer with that. Like, wow, they look good in a pantsuit. Must give them some power. Well, actually, I could wear a tutu and still feel this way, or I could wear, something else. So, I think about the agency right now, the responsibility we have as theater, as artists, to giving the voice to the voiceless. I mean, Dawn, your work sounds remarkable. Cal Poly has a really wonderful commitment to the veterans, which I think is remarkable. Remarkable. But I just think that agency is really something that lives in me now. That I feel a responsibility to, not only with my students, but globally as well as locally.
I sometimes wonder too, like, what happened to that? Like, I've written a couple of essays, and I'm writing a piece right now actually about Harvey Weinstein. And my thing is that he never would have been able to do that to Mae West. He never would have been able to do that to Katharine Hepburn or Joan Crawford. They would have laughed at him in the face. So how do we emulate or project women that can like look at a man like that and just laugh, or Mae West and her amazing sense of humor and her ballsiness of Betty Davis would have eaten him alive.
But Stephanie, none of those women suffered too in their day. None of their wit gave them a pass on any of this too. I don't think I would agree with you, because the studio system, all run by white males at the time, had agency over and permission and ownership over their voice, their image. So even their sassy, brassy character was used to sell these films, may not have been what, any of the women were about necessarily, and may not, and certainly didn't increase their pay, didn't increase, over their male counterparts. So I don't know that it's fair to say that that didn't happen to women like that.
Oh, I'm not saying that it didn't happen. I'm just saying that there was more moxie there. There was something that those women, I mean, those were my idols when I was growing up, and I'm 52, so I'm of a different generation maybe, but I mean, Katharine Hepburn stood up to Henry Fonda and said, "No, you won't." When they were on Golden Pond, she said, "Fuck you, no, we won't." And that was a thing, and she could, and nobody said boo to her. She was Katharine Hepburn. I mean, I wonder, maybe do you have to get to that point before?
I was say that was on Golden Pond was at the end of her.
Yeah, but it was still the Henry Fonda and that Betty Davis and Joan Crawford and all of that. I mean, it just seems like we've become more docile rather than more empowered, and we're fighting battles and again, it's that thing of Shakespeare's still relevant 400 years later. And do we start to do the plays where Cordelia doesn't die at the end and Regan and Goneril don't die at the end, and we say we're going to flip this moral argument to say that women who buck the trend don't have to die for it because the men don't. If you're a bastard, you do. We should talk about like the bastards, because he does have a moral, but he has a moral agenda about the women. Like women, there are some of the women in the canon that do have their own roles and pay with their lives for that ability.
I have to say, I don't know if we've become more docile. You know, maybe we're not wearing as many. We're not wearing as much armor. You know, I think so many of the women had to, what may have, and I'm just saying, we don't know, what may have come across as being ballsy or fighting back might have been just pure armor in attempting to survive and function.
Yeah.
So I just put that out there. I'm not saying it is one thing or the other, but I think,
Well, I have gone through all of my questions. Does anybody have anything to add? Any questions of your own? Anything that came up in the filming of what you did? Anything that you saw? I have to say, I'm blown away by your work, and I'm so grateful. And it's so wonderful to have, 10 women sitting around a table talking like this. It's such a gift.
Just to say, I have to agree with Kimberly when it comes to the idea that we're more docile. I actually feel like very privileged to be not in a generation that, I mean, I'm speaking as an Irish woman in the world, having lived in different countries for many years, but essentially I'm Irish, so I'm working off that context. But I will say that I understand from the way I speak about myself, my sexuality, my choices, my career choice. I have a lot more freedom than my mother, say, as an example. And I would argue that I feel like the vulnerability that we have, because Kimberly was talking about having had maybe an armor, that there's power in the vulnerability that we have now. So we don't have to, well, we do, but I mean, I'm hoping that we don't have to push physically or use huge amounts of energy to push people away from us who are dangerous, and we're more likely to be more honest about what pain they're causing and asking them to ask more of themselves. I'm talking about perpetrators and people who prey on women in our industry and other industries, and prey on people who are other. And so, yeah, I feel very fortunate in comparison, but there's a lot of work to do. That's what I would say.
Yeah, and I think we have we're more awake, and we're becoming more aware, and we're able to see where we've bought in, and we are able to begin the process of dismantling and letting go of hiding behind these socially imposed ways of operating. So I think that's new day, new beginning, or something to acknowledge as we continue to explore these women.
Yeah,
I think that's why this conversations like these are so important, and also conversations where we're asking women directors, yay, Stephanie, Andress, yay, and others, but where we're inviting more people to the table, and not assuming or presuming we know how Ophelia lives in their body, how Lady M lives in their body, how these women live, because we have this base of knowledge, which is not to be ignored, of course, but to invite more people to the table means to be asking them what it means for them, what Shakespeare's text means to them, and how it lives in their body. And I think that's where we get the richness of what is for us today so beautifully articulated, our power in vulnerability, the strength in vulnerability, and that these things that we call weakness and strength, aren't what we think they are anymore. So thank you so much for having this conversation and inviting me.
One of the
You're very welcome.
most gracious and vulnerable and most defining moments for me this year was when Kamala Harris said, "I'm speaking." Mr. Vice President, I'm speaking. And I didn't feel that was any kind of armor. I just felt like it was like, I'm speaking. And that to me, like, shifted me in a way that, was just really, a different, like Kimberly said, I mean, what is our, we have a different armor today. Yeah, we have different clothes that we put on in terms of navigating. And so, it just was a profound moment for me. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, Linda. Go ahead and finish.
I'm done.
Sister.
There.
That casting right there.
Reagan.
But it is, when you're saying we have, I'm speaking, and with the new armor, or the armor that Kimberly is talking about, I think Shakespeare holds that possibility of the woman that's growing today, of the individual or the other that is in Shakespeare. That the writing and the persona and the conflict can carry that, and maybe that's also our exploration in it when we use Shakespeare to tell stories, that we don't put it in a category, but we bring in our new selves and our new things.
I wanted to mention I teach Shakespeare for teenagers at a high school, an arts high school, and these girls, these women, they are going to give us a run for our money, and they are so empowered already at 14, 15, 16, and it's empowering being in a room with them, in a Zoom room with them. But I'm just so excited for the next generation, because we go through Shakespeare and they already see the problems, that it takes us a second to go, yeah, she shouldn't be treated like that. And automatically it's, why didn't she say something back? Where is her monologue? Like Dawn was saying, where is Lady Macbeth's monologue? Where is it? Where is her 14 monologue? She should have 7, like Hamlet. And I love that they are so empowered, and they see wonderful women, like Kamala, and it's just really exciting. And again, it's gonna, I think, propel the rest of us in our generations and the older generations to be empowered ourselves.
And my thing too is that I think as women, we have to collaborate more. We have to defy that male thing of there are 3 women here and a whole male team, and there's this female director and that male director. We're going to pit them against each other, and we're going to make them compete for this one thing, or with like that with writers. And so it puts us in a position of being divisive rather than collaborative. And having rooms like this where we can sit and have conversations and have opposing points of view, and it's something that I have to be honest, I never had in my career except where I created it myself. There were never rooms like that created for me. And that feels really important too, is that we start to create our own, our spaces where we can do that, where we can mentor the next generation coming up, and where we can, instead of competing with each other, be collaborators, where we can be champions of each other, where we can champion each other's work, where we can say, nope, not me, but I know exactly the person, the woman who should be doing this, it's her. And take her, because she's better at this than I am. We don't have language for saying she's the one. So constantly scraping for what little we can get, that we don't know how to be generous. And I watch certain friends of mine, none of whom are on this, who when they go up against a friend or whatever, and the friend gets the role and they didn't, the absolute sort of collapse of themselves and disparaging of that woman who has just succeeded, and not being able to champion that, because there's so little to be had. There's so little space to exist that it feels like a loss to them rather than an actual gain for someone that they know. And there is very little space for us, but we have to champion each other and have each other's backs, I guess, and that sort of thing, and make space for each other. And that was particularly what this was about, because when Linda and I talked about what can you do for the Year of Lear, it was wide open to me. I could have done anything, and I went, I want to do women, even though there are only 3 of them in the play. That.
I don't know, Steph, remember when we had Waking the Feminists happened in the Abbey Theatre in Dublin a few years ago, and it was basically a response to programming by the artistic director at the time. And the Abbey Theatre is our national theatre, so it's a big house, a big producing house. And it's interesting having that big, it was essentially a conference in response to an all-female conference of artists in the theatre industry, asking why there were no female writers in the programming. There were very few female directors in comparison to male. Just asking why, and asking for that conversation. And I think over this last year, I'm on different WhatsApp groups and Zooms because of the situation we're all in. And a lot of them are populated by women in the industry I'm in, whether that's film, theatre. And I'm so excited because so many of them, I can honestly say, genuinely want other women to do well, because we've started to understand that the more of us that are working, the more likely we've created a norm that is for a more female-centric, female-led. So we're working towards balance. But the Waking the Feminists movement was a huge start in a change in vocabulary, and then also a really informed analysis of every programming you see in every institution. You go, oh, what? Why exactly? Why? Instead of going, oh shit, I can't get that job. There's no role. There's no jobs for me. It's we're a little more upright, I think, when it comes to this stuff. So hopefully that will continue. I think it has felt like it's continued despite the lack of work in the pandemic.
What I want to say about that too is, and again, there's a generational thing here, is that don't ever lose the diligence of that going forward, because when I was coming up, I think it was 40% of artistic directors in American regional theaters, in LORT theaters, 40% were run by women. And when Waking the Feminists happened, it turned out that like 10% was. So we went way backwards, because my generation, and I will take this on ourselves, we weren't diligent enough once we got to almost parity of saying we have to continue to work to make sure that continues. We let it go. We let it disappear. And so we have to constantly be diligent to make sure that perpetuates going forward.
I think that goes to Kimberly's awakening now too, because it does no good to be in if you're on their model, scarcity model, white body supremacy model. If you're just going to take over and be carry the patriarchy inside of you as a woman, then no, of course you're not going to reach your hand down and help anyone else, because the scarcity model doesn't allow you. So it's incumbent upon us to do the work that the Coop and San Fran Shakes and these theater companies are leading the way in this work, which is really, really important. And you just articulated exactly why it's important. Because if you're just going to step up and be the male version in a female form, or I shouldn't say male, but the patriarchy version in a female form, then you will not be helping your sisters that way, or the men who also suffer from the system. So I have huge hope that we now see, Stephanie, that we can't just, hooray, we got the job, that we have to go, okay, I have the job and I need a female assistant and I need a non-binary person here, and I want this and I want this voice and I want all of these, and you have to create a new paradigm, a new way of working.
Yep.
Outside
Absolutely.
of the scarcity model.
Absolutely. I call that, by the way, that idea of women acting like men, I call that Margaret Thatcherism, but I can do that because I'm Irish. But it's Margaret Thatcherism. I mean, what the fact that she was a woman meant nothing, meant absolutely nothing. She was more cruel and more ruthless than any man.
And I'm definitely not defending her in any way, shape, or form, but also recognizing that there are incumbent challenges is to be the first. When you arrive as the first, there's no support system there. There's no one rooting for you to succeed. They're rooting against you. So you have a whole different fight. And I think at least I've seen in the history of the country I'm in and where I've worked that, when I was coming up, it was all about assimilation. I was told, in Hollywood, you straighten your hair. It was all about, if you want the job, you do what they say and how they say to do it. There was no your way. It was my way or the highway, the boss's way or the highway. But now there are other things going on and other things moving that is just not, that's not the case anymore. And I think for our betterment, that's not the case. So I think we have more, room to breathe, the more that we take up the time and space that we need.
Ladies, we are at 2 hours.
Yeah.
And I know that just went by like that.
I want to acknowledge Marissa again, who is probably on YouTube watching this, for her generosity and her graciousness of, making this happen. And I also wanted to acknowledge her fine work. And I also wanted to thank Richard for StreamYard and helping. Melissa, thank you for, coming on.
I'm taking that over.
And I also wanted to just take the time and thank you all so very much for your talent and your commitment, your enthusiasm, and for giving yourselves to this project. I hope that you've enjoyed it. I'm forever grateful to Stephanie and to all of you. And maybe we can do something else. Like maybe we can do Ophelia's point of view about rewriting Hamlet. I kind of like to make her a stage manager going, stop. Let's do it this way. You've given me a lot of food for thought, but thank you so much for your generosity. I hope that, and I'll put it in an email formally, but would you mind if people watch the YouTube of this on the Southern California Shakespeare Festival page? Does anybody mind? And if you do, you need to just let me know and we will make it work for you. That would be to share your videos. And if you don't want that to happen, please let us know. There's no problem with that. We'll edit it out if you'd like that. But and if you can take a moment to subscribe to the YouTube channel, that'd be great if you would do that. But please let me know and I'll put it formally in an email. But again, thank you so very, 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 very
much. Thank you.
Thank you, Marissa. Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a lovely evening, afternoon, morning, everyone.
Thank you. Bye. Bye. Oh my God, that was so great. Thank you. Thanks, Melissa.